Breathing deeply, I invite you to simply follow your breath into your heart. And begin to feel your heart expand. Begin to recognize that there is a peace and a love and a joy at the center of you that is available at need, any moment, any time. It is right where you are. And simply allow yourself to be lifted in your conscious awareness of this love, of this joy, of this peace. Allow yourself to recognize and know your unity with all things. God is all there is, the infinite life, the infinite spirit, the infinite love, the infinite joy, the infinite peace. And it is right where you are. It is right where I am. And so in this moment, as I open this service, we stand in the conviction that God is good, that God is love, that God is joy, that God is peace, and all is well. And so we open our hearts and our minds to the blessing that is ours this day and every day. We allow ourselves to be lifted and transformed by our understanding of spirit. We allow ourselves to anchor in spiritual community that supports us on the path. And we simply stand in the blessing that is ours. And so it's with a grateful heart that I simply say yes to the good that is unfolding this day, and I surrender it all to that infinite mind and allow its love, its joy, its peace to inform all that unfolds here this day. I call it good and very, very good. And so it is. Amen. Today's reading is from our book of the month, Life Visioning by Reverend Michael Beckwith. We're talking about visioning all month. And each week we'll take a reading from this book to take us deeper with that theme. And just let me mention that if you're inspired by this, it is available in our bookstore. Reverend Michael says, having a sense of what we have to look forward to whets our appetite to evolve. It's energizing and motivating to know that there is a way out of our limiting thoughts and constricting behavior patterns, that there is a much larger life just waiting for us to say yes and move toward it. There is an inner impulsion within us that propels us in the direction of self-discovery. The 4 stages of spiritual growth are meant to serve as outlines, and each of us moves through them according to our own unique pattern of unfoldment. Sri Aurobindo, the great Hindu philosopher, describes the consciousness of a liberated being in this way. The liberated individual who has realized the self and spirit within, who has entered into the cosmic consciousness, acts by the light and the power within, working through human instruments. This is a total liberation of soul, mind, heart, and action, a casting of all of these into a sense of the cosmic self and the divine reality. Visioning is an evolutionary technology that accelerates a realization of the self and spirit. And the 4 stages reveal the areas in which we have yet to prepare our consciousness for that liberating realization. Are you ready for a liberating realization? Yeah. Please join me in today's affirmation, also written by Reverend Michael Beckwith. I'm going to read it through once first, and then I'll invite you to join me with conviction. I am willing to evolve. I am willing to become more myself. I am willing to drop opinions that no longer serve the evolution of my soul. I am willing and available to more good than I have ever experienced, realized, imagined, or manifested before, right here, right now. And please stand, and let's declare this with conviction, as though we know it is true, because it is. I am willing to evolve. I am willing to become more myself. I am willing to drop opinions that no longer serve the evolution of my soul. I am willing and available to more good than I've ever experienced, realized, imagined, or manifested before, right here, right now. And so it is. I love that song because what it says to me is the prerequisites for healing are joy and peace. That's it. Joy and peace in my heart, joy and peace in my mind, joy and peace in my life. I'm healed. Boom. Done. So if there is a place in your life where you are not experiencing joy and peace, perhaps that's just the universal mind, the universal presence saying to you, here's an opportunity for healing. Maybe if you put your attention a little bit on some joy and some peace in that area of your life, you might have a different experience. You might experience a healing. What a beautiful idea that is. And we are talking today about evolution of consciousness, the stages of spiritual growth. And we're talking about that because last week we talked about visioning, didn't we? All month, in fact, we're talking about catching God's vision for our lives, the divine mind's vision for our lives. Instead of running around in our human doing, how do we become a beingness of spirit? How do we catch God's idea for what we should be up to? Because, the mind of God is like way seriously big, y'all. Right? I mean, our minds are pretty big. They're bigger than we know. They're bigger than we realize, right? We don't even use very much of our brains. But the mind of God is infinite. And so as we live in that mind, we live in a realm of infinite possibility. And so this month, all month, we're talking about not only how do we vision for our lives, how do we catch God's vision for our life, but we're also going to be talking with our board of trustees and over the next few months with you, how do we live in God's vision for our center? And we are a collection of individuals having our being here at Unity of Bellevue. And so as we each get in touch more deeply with God's vision for our lives, our collective vision will be more fully empowered. So you have a part. And your work is done in consciousness. Because what do we teach? What's the core fundamental thing? God is all there is, consciousness is cause. The manifest universe is the result of an infinite consciousness. We are created in the image and likeness of that consciousness. And so we are first cause in our lives. So let us do the work in consciousness so that we can have a bigger experience of life. Are you down for doing that work with me? Beautiful. I'm so excited about it. We talked last week about visioning, and we talked about a technique and a method for visioning, and we're actually not going to review that today. If you want to know what that was, you can watch the video on our website if you happen to miss last week. If you were here, let me just remind you that one of the things we talked about is that all life does is express, right? That's all it does. That's really all it wants to do. You plant a seed and the seed begins to express as plant, right? That's all it does. We simply express. How do we align with and express God's idea for our lives instead of our limited human idea? And so our vision is just our preferred future. And I have some ideas about, my human ideas about my future, but then there's God's idea about my future. And so we begin to catch God's vision. And the technique we talked about last week was how do we open ourselves up to receive that vision. And today we're going to talk about where do we vision from? From what state of consciousness do we vision from? And I'll get there in a minute. Sometimes my mind moves faster than my mouth can, right? Sorry, not there yet. So there are kind of three elements for us to know where we're going. One is having a clear vision, knowing our preferred future. Where do we want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Yes? What is our preferred future? The second element that we want to talk about is what is our purpose? Why are we here? How many of you, you're 100% clear? I know why I am on planet Earth right now. It's really clear to me. I know why I'm here. Yeah, a few of us. That's awesome. I would say at our most fundamental level, we are here to love. That's it. We are all here. Our purpose is to love. Now, we will have, for every person who's in this room, there will be a different kind of take on that overall purpose. So your purpose for being here on planet Earth is probably anchored in something having to do with love. My purpose is anchored in the idea of facilitating an experience of love in communities. That's why I became a minister, right? Makes sense? All right, and I could say more about that, but not today. So our purpose overall is anchored in love, and then it expresses individually for each one of us. And the more in touch with our purpose we are, the more easily it's going to express. And if we don't know what our purpose is, it's not going to express, right? It's going to be blocked. And that's why we don't have joy and peace in our hearts. We're blocking the natural expression of that which we are called to be. The third element that has to be in place, now that you know what your vision is and what your purpose is, you have to have a mission or a plan for getting there. How are you going to get to the vision anchored in your purpose? So that's last week in a nutshell. Today, we want to go deep with this idea that we have to vision from a particular place. And that place is a place of the divine rather than the human. Because if we vision from the human idea, we get a human result. And there's nothing wrong with us. We're kind of cool. But we have limited ideas compared to the infinite, don't we? God always has a bigger idea than I do. So there are two ways to vision. We touched on this briefly last week. We can vision from our imagination. We can imagine some kind of a preferred future. Or we can vision from divine mind. And in order to vision from divine mind, we have to lift ourselves into that consciousness, allow ourselves to experience a unity with the infinite. You see, if we vision from our imaginations, we are visioning from our human ideas and attachments. Are you attached to anything? Do you have any beliefs that might limit you? Do you see, if we are visioning from imagination, we are allowing what we think we can have or do or be to tell us what we can have or do or be. We are projecting our own consciousness. We are projecting our will. And a lot of times when we project our will, we like to say it's God's will, don't we? Well, it's God's will that we should go do this thing. How many, I hear that and I just go, yeah, whatever. Because most of the time what that really is a projection of our own consciousness. Emma Curtis Hopkins talks about everything that we see and do is but a projection of our own consciousness. If we can lift ourselves into the divine mind, we become receptive. We stop projecting and start receiving the bigger idea. Are you with me? I'm with me too. This is kind of exciting. So what we want to do is become receptive to the divine idea. Emma Curtis Hopkins called it this. She said, I will to will God's will. That's a powerful little affirmation. Say it with me. I will to will God's will. Are you ready? I will to will God's will. Now, here's what's a little dangerous about that, because, when we say something like that, we can sometimes start to think that God is a guy sitting in a chair in the clouds with a will for us, right? That's not what this is. I will to will the divine mind as the ruler of my life. I will to will the divine mind as that which motivates and calls me forth into a greater yet to be. I will to will God's will is shorthand for all of that. Say it with me one more time. Ready? I will to will God's will. And so what we want to do is become receptive to an idea that the divine mind has and then become a channel for that vision. Now let me be clear. In our culture, we have some folks who engage in an activity that they call channeling. And as far as I'm concerned, the jury is out on that. I see some wisdom coming from that experience for some people. I'm not talking about becoming channelers or channeling, okay? I am talking about becoming receptive and open and available to the divine idea and then being a willing instrument to have that flow through us. Become a willing instrument for the mind of God to think you, to be you, to inspire you, to call you into something that you never could have thought of with your limited ideas of, oh, there's not enough money, the weather's bad, there's no time. I'm really good at that. Ask Patty, she'll tell you. Oh, it's Eeyore syndrome, right? It'll never work. We can't do that. There's not money. No, poor us. You know what I love about Eeyore as a character? Actually, the whole kind of context of his character. Eeyore was like totally a downer, right? and he's such a great example of that. And yet Eeyore was so loved, right? And I think that that's what moves us through that way of being, is when people love us anyway. It's like, yeah, honey, that's cute. Now let's go do what God would have us do, right? So we want to be sure and love ourselves when we're doing that, because love is the only thing that moves us through, right? Remember, your purpose is love at its most fundamental core. And so we love others and we love ourselves even when there being Eeyores in our lives. And so we want to become a channel for that vision, and that is only a different way of saying we want to vision from a particular place. And that place is a place of high consciousness. That place is a place of receptivity and willingness and availability. So how do we get to that place? Ready? All right. Thank you, Eileen. She's ready. Reverend Michael Beckwith, and he's not the only one, Reverend Marcia Sutton also developed a very similar model. It's actually the exact same model using different language. Talk about the 4 stages of spiritual growth. Or Reverend Marcia uses the term kingdoms of consciousness, the 4 kingdoms of consciousness. If you're in the Sisters in Spirit, many of you have had an opportunity to learn about this model. How many of you remember? Oh, great. All right. Well, 1. We'll do it again. So there is this model of spiritual growth. And as it said in the reading, this is a model. And the reading really goes deep with the model. It's a model. It's not, a written in stone. It's the way things tend to unfold, okay? So you see, I'm going to talk about the way things tend to unfold, and you let me know if this has any resonance with how your life has unfolded. Are you ready? Yeah. The first stage of spiritual growth, Reverend Michael calls to me. Everything is done to me. Victim consciousness. You get that? In this stage of spiritual growth, everything in the world is about me. And if you hear yourself saying things like, why me? Or they did this to me, you are probably operating in victim or to me consciousness. Have you ever done that? I'm sure everybody has but me. I'm sure I never went through this stage. Actually, here, some of you have heard me say this before, but I'm going to say it again because it is such a perfect example. There was a time in my life when I really was not very responsible about money, and I used to bounce a lot of checks. It was a long time ago, you guys. But here's what would happen. I would get these notices in the mail. Damn that bank, they bounced another check. How dare they? How could they do that to me? I had checks left. What is with them? Couldn't they have just carried it for a couple of days? What's wrong with them? To me. Everything is done to me. I am a victim. It never occurred to me that maybe the problem was I was writing bad checks. It was all about them. And I was at the effect of their power. I had no power myself. This is quintessential to me or victim consciousness. In this realm of consciousness, blame, shame, guilt, judgment rule our lives. External stuff rules how we experience ourselves and our lives. Is this familiar to anyone? Reverend Michael says, in to me consciousness, we are afflicted by our own point of view. Have you ever been afflicted by your own point of view? Twice. The challenge of this stage is that, we become subject to everything out there and we have no power and no control over our lives, right? We become subject to the mass consciousness or the mass mind, that collective consciousness, if you will. Wherever it goes, we go there. And we have no quality of life. In fact, our quality of life is dependent on externals. If I'm on vacation in Hawaii, life is good, but then the hotel clerk is rude to me and it's to me and life is bad. Yes? This is to me consciousness. The next stage of spiritual growth he talks about is by me. Everything is done by me. So the first stage is everything is done to me. The second stage is everything is done by me. I direct my experience. I am in control and I can make things happen. You see, when I began to wake up and realize that maybe if I stopped writing bad checks, I wouldn't bounce so many of them, that I could have some control over that experience in my life, I began to move into this by me stage. Make sense? So we begin to understand that we have the power to direct our experience, and I like to think of it as the make it so stage. I can make things happen. We begin to learn spiritual law. Perhaps we apply that law to our experience of life. We begin to use our affirmations, and we begin to learn and grow that we have some power, that we can take dominion over our affairs. We use the law to do that, the spiritual law to do that. Challenge with this phase is it's a lot of work. Make sense? We get tired. Because we're always doing. Make it so, make it so, make it so. Be about it. Make it happen. Work hard. So we begin to run out of energy. And it can also be, for many of us, a very materialistic stage. That it become about getting and acquiring. Okay, I've learned the law. I know how to apply it. And now I'm going to use it to get things. How many of you saw that movie, The Secret? Remember that movie about 15 years ago? I have to tell you, I watched that movie with mixed emotions because that film, as much as there is a fundamental core of spiritual truth in it, that film is about getting, and that is all it is about. And it irritates me because, yes, we want to know how to manifest what we need in life, yes, or even what we want. We want to know how to manifest the desires of our hearts, but life is bigger than that. We want more than that. But in the manifester stage, or the by me stage, or kingdom 2 consciousness that Reverend Marcia talks about, what we are doing is practicing that skill of manifesting and getting. So I don't want to make it wrong, because it's an important skill to have, but there is more than that. Yes? Stage 3. Stage 3 consciousness is through me. He talks about God moving through me. This is where we begin to become a channel for the presence of God. Spirit moves directly through me to guide and direct me so that I have a richer, more fundamentally satisfying experience of life so that I can express its good, its love, its grace, its power more fully. This is where we want a vision from. Yes? Because in these first 2 kingdoms, if we begin to practice visioning, we're visioning with that human limited projection consciousness, right? If we can lift ourselves into through me and allow ourselves to surrender the human idea and anchor in the divine idea, suddenly we have a different vision, a different experience of life. This is the consciousness from which we wish to vision. And then the 4th stage, and then we're going to go all the way back to 1. Are you ready? The 4th stage is as me. That is a state of complete and total grace. A state of complete and total grace. God moves as me. I move as the divine. There is no separation, a sense of complete and total oneness. I think of, when I think of as me consciousness, I think of Jesus saying, the Father and I are one. The Father and I are one. Greater things than this will you do. This is as me. This is when Spirit begins to move as us in the world. The Buddha says, wake up. Wake up. That awakened state is the as me state. Now, here's what's interesting about this state. It's pretty elusive, you guys. Okay? I mean, I don't know. I've had moments in that state of consciousness, usually during spiritual practice or meditation, right? I've had moments, but I can't ever say I've walked in that state of consciousness. Does that make sense? It's a pretty high state. And I kind of think if you've actually reached the place where you can operate from that place all the time, you're probably going to dematerialize and become like some other kind of a spiritual being, because you don't need this human body anymore. Does that make sense? And yet what I believe is true is that I've had the experience of this state. Remember what the reading said about it's kind of motivating to know that we have something to look forward to. Have you ever had one of those flow moments? You know, what if you spent your life working toward getting more of those flow moments? Those are as me state of grace moments, stage 4 moments. We cannot create or be in this state of consciousness. We can only prepare for it. And how we prepare for it is through our spiritual practice. How you doing with that, by the way? Everybody have a daily spiritual practice? Thank you. Good. Yeah, nice. I like it. So those are the 4 stages. The question might be on your mind, how do I get from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4? So let's talk about that for a moment. Remember, stage 1 is what? To me, right? This is our victim. This is where, Marla writes bouncers and can't understand why they keep bouncing them. It's kind of crazy. Reverend Marcia talks about to move from stage 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, she says you must step through a portal of consciousness, okay? And so the portal of consciousness we have to step through to move from victim to manifester, or to me to by me, is taking responsibility for everything in our lives. I am responsible for my experience of life. I am responsible for all these bounce checks. I can't blame the bank anymore. This is me. I'm writing them. And it kind of cracks me up. I'm even using this as an example, because who writes a check anymore? Like that, it can't even happen now, right? Because you're just going to turn down your debit card. But anyway, I take responsibility for my life. I choose to be financially responsible, and I hold myself accountable to that. And you know what? I didn't stop bouncing checks overnight. It took me a while. I didn't have financial management skills. But using my manifester consciousness, I began to learn to manage my finances more effectively, okay? And I bounced fewer checks, and then fewer, and then I didn't bounce any at all. Make sense? And so when I took responsibility for my experience of life, when I chose to be responsible and held myself accountable to those choices, suddenly I began to have a different experience. The key to this release, this stepping into responsibility, is to release blame and shame and guilt. Stage 1 is all about you're bad, I'm bad, they're bad, the world is bad, politicians are bad, so-and-so's bad. No, it just is. That's what it is. And what's being manifested is a certain stage of consciousness. That's it. And we're all on the spiritual journey, and we've all been in all 4 stages, so let's not make anybody bad, because that was us once, or it might be us again. Yeah. So we release blame and shame and guilt. We release judgment. And we begin to move into this by me stage where we learn our skills, we learn the spiritual laws, we begin to apply them, and we begin to have a different experience of life. Now, like I said, we run into the exhausted energy because everything is by me. My human self is doing everything. And so what we must surrender to move from stage 2 to stage 3, hold on to your hats, control. I know. We have to release our need to control. See, the thing about the by me is we get to be in control. Isn't that awesome? I love to be in control, baby. That's a good thing. But you know what? For me to move into a place where I can become a channel for the divine idea for my life, I must surrender my need to control. I must stop doing and start being. And I begin to have these moments of through me consciousness. I begin to surrender to the divine mind that is greater than I am. And something wonderful begins to happen in my life. Here is the key. I still have all the skills that I learned in stage 2, right? Now I'm doing them for a different reason. I'm doing them because it's naturally who I am, because it creates divine order in my life, because that it allows God to move through me more freely, not so that I can control things and have enough and get things. And that's two different places, right? And so let me be really clear when I talk about this, you can't skip a kingdom, you can't skip a stage. We need the victim experience. We need the by me experience. We need the skills that we develop all along the line so that when we are able to be more fully in this channel place, this through me place, we can run our lives effectively. Make sense? I'm a much better financial manager. I mean, I'll never be an accountant or anything. Don't, get your hopes up. I'll never be a bookkeeper, But I have those skills, and they flow pretty easily through me now. Okay? And then the stage 4 release, to move from stage 3 to stage 4, really the thing that we must surrender is our human sense of self, our sense of separation, right? Now, let me just be really clear. Reverend Marcia says we move through the stages like a blob. I love that phrase. So, there might be a blob of me in one stage of consciousness around one thing in my life. I'm pretty good in some areas of my life. I kind of feel like I'm mostly in stage 2 and stage 3 and kind of going back and forth around some of my leadership stuff, right? But take me home into my family, all my victim stuff starts to come out again. Make sense? See, so I'm kind of blobbish, I'm kind of moving through, and then I get, and I get home and I kind of, oh yeah, I am remembering who I am, right? I'm kind of doing this, trying to get myself back into that bigger idea, that bigger consciousness, because the fact is, under stress, we regress. When we get stressed out, we move back to the old coping strategies, the old beliefs, the old skills that seemed to work for us. We begin to forget who we are, which is why we affirm, I am remembering who I am, because the spiritual truth of you is something magnificent. And so under stress, we regress, but let us own the spiritual truth of ourselves even when we are stressed out. So you can't skip a kingdom. You got to have all of those skills, remembering and forgiving yourself for regressing under stress and simply restarting once again. And finally for today, the stages are why, you heard me say this last week, we don't work on the vision, we work on the questions in the visioning process. And let's think back to last week. The questions were things like, what must I release to embody this vision? What must I learn? How must I change and grow? What must I embrace? And you see, when we begin to ask and work with those questions, we're using those questions as a vehicle to support us in walking through each portal, right? The portal of releasing blame, shame, and guilt. When we're asking, how must I learn and grow? What must I be? That helps us move through that portal. When we are asking questions like, oh God, here I am controlling again. How do I grow out of that habit that doesn't serve me? Then suddenly we are able to move from stage 2 to stage 3 more effectively, more easily. And you see, then the vision just starts to flow because we're a channel for it. We don't have to do anything to bring the vision about. It simply unfolds because we're doing the work in consciousness. We can't do anything. We have to be something. And if we can be something big, be something powerful, be something courageous, be something loving, be something grace-filled, then the vision simply naturally unfolds. How's everybody doing? You're ready to move forward into our vision for our lives and for our center? What I'd like to do right now is invite you to take the sacred breath with me as we do a little bit of spiritual practice here. And I invite you right now to simply breathe deeply and fully. And breathe into your heart. For it is here that we see with the eye of love. And indeed, at its most fundamental level, our purpose is love. So let us anchor in love. And as you breathe into your heart, simply begin to feel that love spill out into your entire body. You feel your body begin to fill with the energy of love, with the life of love. Every cell, every organ in your body comes alive with an awareness of love. Every joint, every tendon, every bone is remembering right now where we come from, who we are, and what we belong to. We belong to the infinite heart of the universe. And the infinite heart of the universe is the heart of love. And as you anchor in this awareness, I just invite you to look around your life for any place that you might be thinking you are a victim. Anywhere in your life you might be saying they are wrong. Anywhere in your life you might be saying they did to me. Think about anyone you might be blaming, shaming, or judging. And see if you can begin to anchor those feelings in an awareness of love. For we know that love heals all things. We know that there is an essence in a life that is greater than we are, and even where we cannot release, it can. And even if you cannot fully release right now, see if you can let go a little bit. See if you can step through the portal of responsibility and begin to recognize how you might be playing a part. See if you can't anchor more fully in love. In fact, right now, just see yourself free of any sense of blame, any sense of shame, any sense of guilt. You stand tall in the truth of who you are, anchored in the infinite mind of God. And as you rest in this awareness, just allow yourself to bring to mind anywhere you need to release control. Any place in your life you are hanging on to managing, making it so, controlling things. And I invite you to just step through a portal of release. Step through the portal of release. Release your need to control. Surrender your need to do. And step forth into the power of being. See yourself in the infinite light and wisdom and power and grace of God right now, a channel for its energy, its life, its wisdom, right where you are. Created in its image and likeness, perfect, whole, and complete, a surrendered instrument to the mind and the heart and the body and the power and the grace of God, right here and right now. This is the spiritual truth of you. Revel in it. And give thanks for it. And join me as we anchor this experience in the affirmation, I am remembering who I am.
I am remembering who I am. I am remembering who I am.
And so we remember, and so we are, and so it is done, and so it is. Amen.